Awesome. Let me just move this out the way. All right. So we are talking about pivoting in pain. Pivoting in pain. You know, sometimes when we hear that word, we count ourselves out because we're thinking, well, you know, I'm not really in pain. I'm good. This is a little, you know, it's a little much, but I'm okay, right? A lot of the times I find that as high achieving women, we're not always privy to the emotional injury that's happening in our emotional space. And that's because we have something called defense mechanisms. Let me tell you what the defense mechanism is. Your defense, I'm just going to use this as an analogy. This is not real. I don't want you to go to the doctor and say, I want to meet my men, because I call them men. So we have men, an army of men that work very, very hard to keep us well, guys. Some of us have 1,000 men that are in our defense army. Some of us have 20,000. Some of us have 4 or 5. It all depends on your upbringing. It all depends on what your experience in life has been. Some of us have a really, really huge army of defense men because you have been overcoming obstacles since you were 2. Truth be told, some people have experienced trauma that young. And here we are in our 20s, 30s, 40s, 50s, 60s, 70s, whatever it is. And we have recruited so many army men that work really hard to keep our emotional space safe. And so think about it like a large wall, and these men stand in front of that wall, and they have machine guns, they got 9mm, they got elephant guns, and they work really hard to make sure that the pain on the other side of the wall, the emotional injury on the other side of the wall, the memories of the molestation on the other side of the wall, the abuse, the divorce, the brokenness on the other side of the wall stay on the other side of the wall. They are responsible for making sure that nothing comes in and nothing goes out. Nothing comes in and nothing goes out. So as a therapist, I often find that individuals in therapy, their defense men stand up like, okay, now we actually have someone that's encouraging you to allow some of the stuff in the back of that wall out. You know, you have worked your whole life to not think about the abuse, not think about all of the hurt and pain, not think about the emotional injury. And then you go to therapy and it's like, I want you to talk about it. I want you to tell me what you remember. I want you to tell me what you remember seeing and smelling and feeling. And those defense men, they stand up at an attention because they are ready to go, right? So we have to understand that while our defense men are awesome for some people, for some, their defense men are starting to wear down. They're starting to lose power. They're letting you know that they need to go on vacation. You're starting to feel a little bit different. You're starting to have memories that you didn't necessarily have. You're starting to experience emotion that you necessarily didn't experience. You're crying more often. You're emoting. And that is because the pressures of our time are starting to cause these defense men to get a little weaker. And that that's not necessarily a bad thing for some of us. Some of us have so many things swept up under the carpet or on the other side of that wall that it's going to cause you to break down. Why? Although our defense men work really, really hard to keep things on the other side of that wall, you have to understand that the energy, even though you're still focusing, right? You're still thriving. You're still doing your thing as a CEO chick. But sometimes you'll sit down and just feel exhausted and not really know where that comes from. It's because whether you are attending to the emotional injury or not, it's going to do what it's designed to do, and that's to break you down. Emotional injury is a malignant tumor. And although you may have 1,000 men fighting on your behalf, there comes a time where everything on the other side of that wall, if you're not electing to do it voluntarily, will involuntarily spill right over. And so this is why it's important for us to press pause and have these conversations and process our emotions so that we are voluntarily allowing these issues, our thoughts, our fears, our sources of anxiety, that we are voluntarily processing it so it doesn't involuntarily bubble over. One of the things that I can use as an example, just for you to kind of understand where we are at in this time, is this. How many of you can do a full split? Tell me if you can do a full split. I've just said this on one of my classes and you guys all laughed at me, those who were in the chat. Let me see what you guys are saying. How many of you can go into a full split right now? Full split. I know I cannot, right? Asha says negative, no full split. Okay, well, you know, what would happen, Asha, please let me know if I'm saying that wrong, but I love your name. I hope I'm saying it right. Asha, if I, Lencia says not and still be alive, LOL. And okay, thank you, Asha. So if I jumped on your back, Lencia, or jumped on your back, Asha, and forced you down into a full split, what do you think would happen? What would happen? Marilyn says, LOL, nope. If I jumped on your back and forced you down into a full split, you will most likely, someone said, Glenay said fight. Most of us would have like pulled muscles, possibly some broken bones, right? We would be injured because we are not trained, right, to go down into a split. Our muscles are not flexible enough at that time to handle that level of stretching. And so think about our brain. While our brain is an organ, it operates very much like a muscle. And we are in this time where we are being stretched beyond capacity. We had to stretch during the pandemic, and now we have to stretch during these protests, worldwide protests. There's so much opposition, so many challenges in the midst of us. And so while you may not attend to it fully and may not be fully engaged to what your emotional experience is during this time, understand that the injury is happening while you are being stretched beyond belief. So what we're going to talk about today is leading and influencing in this climate. This month, we are focusing on influencers. We're talking about being an influence. And while we're here on this slide, I just want you guys to, let's just make sure that we're on the same page in terms of the difference between a leader and an influencer. And this in itself can be this whole 45-minute, right? Just really deep diving into the difference between a leader and an influencer. So for the purpose of this training, understand that a leader is a person with authority that oversees commands and demands that have been placed on other people, a group, an organization. So a leader is someone with authority that releases, that's responsible for these commands and these demands, right, that are placed on a group of people, persons, organizations, or a project. An influencer is someone who uses their power, their energy, their vibrations to cause people or to cause others to change in their mindset, to change their behavioral patterns, to change their belief systems. That's an influencer. Now you can have an influencer who's not necessarily a leader. Sometimes we'll put influencers in leadership positions, but they don't have the leadership skills to lead. We got to be careful of truly understanding people's strengths. However, and a leader too, you may have a leader that's not necessarily an influencer, right? So they know how to lead, they have the skills in place, but they're really not influencing. They're not influencing. So you have people that are complying, but they're not necessarily transforming. They may be complying because you're the leader and you have authority, but they're not becoming, they're not abounding, they're not growing, they're not necessarily changing. And we are in a life that without change, you will die. Without change, you will die. So what does that mean then? So do we want a leader or do we want an influencer? CEO chicks, we say we want our leaders to be influencers, because leaders with influence create legacy. Leaders with influence create legacy. Legacy is when that purpose of yours continues to live strong way past your living, way past your time here on this side of heaven. That's legacy, when your purpose continues to compel, continues to activate, continues to affect change way after you transition to glory. That is what legacy is about. And so us as a network, we want to be a part of that process where our leaders are becoming influencers. And that's what this month is about. But we have this added element to this process. And the added element is leading and influencing during this climate that we just talked about, during this climate. And so we have coaches that specialize in different areas. So we talked about our goal is to have, like, you know, powerful women who are leading and influencing. So we have a financial coach to help build those skills that we need to manage our finances. We have our branding coach that assures that through our branding, we are dominating in our sphere of influence, right? And then we have other coaches, me specifically, my role as the wellness coach, as a licensed psychotherapist, is to assure that in this process of leading and influencing, that we are checking in with our emotional space. And that is what today is about. We're going to talk about regulating extreme emotions, identifying your coping style, recognizing secondary trauma, influencing from a place of pain. We're going to talk about how to do that, pivot and prospering in challenging times. So who are we as influencers? Who are we? Let's talk about those characteristics of an influencer. Number one, you got to know that you're an influencer. You got to know that you're an influencer. Because if you don't know that you are an influencer, you can inadvertently hurt people. Because influencers have power over the way that people think, the way that they behave, the way that they change their minds. There's power in over their characteristics, because that's what an influencer does. So if you are not careful and don't understand the anointing that you carry, the power that you carry as an influencer, you can be in your feelings and post something that was a temporary emotion for you, but because you are an influencer, you will influence the mindset of someone who reads that. See, when you're an influencer, we can't do like everybody does. We can't post like everybody does. We can't go and just be angry and using our words as aggression towards other people when you are an influencer. Does that make sense? So it's important to know that you are an influencer. You have to know that you carry that power. We have to be aware that we have the capacity to influence outcomes in the earth. You gotta know. Can you imagine? That's like walking in the middle of a battlefield with a machine gun or an elephant gun and not even realize that you are equipped to wipe out the enemy, to wipe out the opposition. So we have to know our power. We have to be aware that we do have the capacity to influence outcomes in the atmosphere. We know that people look to us for our ideas and thoughts. People look for our ideas and our thoughts, even when you don't realize it. Oh, they're waiting. They're waiting for that post. They're waiting for that video to post. They're waiting for that live. I know for myself, I was waiting to hear from TD Jakes. I was waiting for it, you know, and because I could not reconcile my emotions. I was so angry. I'm looking at this looting and I'm looking at all the rioting, and truth be told, I was thinking to myself, go, do it, just do it. When I saw the images of the burning precinct, there was an emotion that was like, this is not how I want to feel right now, right? But I had to allow myself to kind of go through the cycle of emotions, and I was waiting to hear from people that I consider influential, and TD Jakes was one of them. And so this is just, I'm giving you an example of how our ideas and thoughts are influential. We know that our internalisms affect the emotional experience of others. We're learning a new word today, internalisms. Internalisms are those processes that people cannot see. Your thoughts, your emotions, your perspectives, those are your internalisms. We understand that the needs of the people that we influence. So let me go back. This is us as influencers. We know that we're influencers. We are aware of our capacity to influence outcomes. We know that people look to us for our ideas and our thoughts. We know that our internalisms affect the emotional experience of others. So we got to be careful. Yeah, you could be real. You could be real. You could be authentic, right? But you got to do that with discernment, because our feelings are not facts. So we got to be careful with that, right? Before you take it to social media, take it to your higher power. Give yourself some time to give your emotions some time to regulate. Why? Because our internalisms affect the emotional experience of others. And this is so big right here. As influencers, we have to understand the needs of the people that we influence, because we have to meet a need. That's why they call us influencers, because we're meeting some type of need. So it's important to understand what humans need in this time. So I want us to just kind of summarize the human experience, which has been amazing since the start of 2020. I remember thinking in 2019, when everybody was talking about 2020 vision or the year of perfect vision, I'm thinking that's so cliche because it's 2020. I was feeling something completely different in the spirit. Little did I know that this is exactly what was intended for this year. All of the exposure, how bias is being exposed right now, how the weaknesses of our government and our country are being exposed right now, the weaknesses of our medical, our medical resilience and everything that we learned as a result of this pandemic. Wow. We now see just how delicate life is, how sensitive time is. We now see and value the interconnectedness between family and friends. There's so much that we're seeing right now. So it's important as influencers for us to kind of collectively understand the human experience. Let's run through these very quickly, and you can add some as we go. Much more individuals have tapped into the digital space and learned to function in that space. My mom, who could barely text, now knows how to log on to Zoom. Wow. So much more individuals have tapped into the digital space. Many more individuals are health conscious, specifically as it is related to germs. Many more individuals want to limit exposure to the outside world. Many more have a heightened awareness of financial security. There is more heightened awareness and desire for holistic living, heightened awareness and desire for online purchasing. There is an understanding that our children can get unhindered education virtually. We saw it for ourselves as we sat here and struggled with their lesson plans, right? But we got exposure to that. Those impacted by COVID-19 and their loved ones are looking for justice. I have a paralegal that I counsel. She talked about how they are overwhelmed with cases. These are people that are literally suing, alleging that they were exposed in certain businesses that had the duty to protect their customers. Individuals are stricken with grief. People are looking to resolve the estates and assets of their loved ones. We have learned how to connect with loved ones virtually and even celebrate with them virtually, right? We learn how to do weddings, funerals, unfortunately, virtually, celebrate birthdays virtually. This is the human experience. Let's continue. We are watching people develop into greater levels of compassion and kindness. This is pre-George Floyd, by the way. I'm going to put a little note here because this is something that I've taught on, and this was pre-George Floyd, right? Because we saw great levels of compassion and kindness during pandemic, and that just seems like it just kind of disappeared in just a matter of days. People have found ways to worship their higher power outside of a church building. Households are cooking more. People are avoiding crowds. Again, pre-George Floyd, we are watching people develop into greater levels of compassion. Oh, these are, looks like these are, okay, here we go. Those were repeats. People are avoiding crowds. That was pre-George Floyd. Post-George Floyd, people are looking to belong. People want to belong to a movement. They want to help. They want to be a part of the answer. We are talking about the human experience. Humans want to help. They want to connect. They want to feel valuable. They want purpose in this climate. Self-examination is happening worldwide. Those who are experiencing and now have been exposed to their own biases are repenting. I put a video on my timeline of a community of Caucasian residents in this housing development. I'm not even sure what the situation was. You can find it on my timeline. Literally kneeling before a community of African Americans, repenting, crying and saying they see the bias, they see the inequality, they see the compromise now. So there's self-examination going worldwide. There is great exposure to truth. It's creating a lot of emotional discomfort within people. People are experiencing confusion. They're angry, they're fearful, they're experiencing anxiety, depression. They're being hypervigilant, looking to the left and right. Am I safe? They're experiencing insomnia and more. People want to feel effective. They're looking to latch on to something productive. Humans want connectivity, which is a need. This is the human experience. And as influencers, we always have to be assessing human needs, not only because we're influencers, but we're CEOs. Because the human experience will help us to determine how humans will behave. And as CEOs, we have to make sure that we are ready to respond to that demand, right? And turn challenges into opportunities. Turn challenges into opportunities. So we have to constantly be on top of that understanding of what the human need is. So right now, we're looking at safety being a human need. Security, which is what? Financial security, job security. Connecting with others is a human need right now. People are afraid. They want to connect. Health is a human need right now. Staying healthy, because guess what? While there's smoke screens, while I'm sure there are people in high places that would love for us to continue to expose ourselves to this virus, we are needing health. We're needing peace. We're needing to be effective. That is the human need. I want to talk about how our brains respond to these challenging times. I call it the survival brain. Our brains are designed to keep us alive in the midst of harm. So when our brains perceive harm, when our brains perceive a threat, it goes into survival mode. And that is also referred to as fight or flight mode. And so there's a part of our brain back here, it's called the amygdala. And when that gets triggered, when that gets stimulated, your brain says, things are not safe. We have to run. We got to pump blood to the arms and the hands and the legs and the feet. We got to get ready to jump the fence. We got to get ready to fight the burglar that's coming in, whatever that perceived threat is. That's what happens when our brain is in survival mode. We have been in survival brain since the start of this year. We have been in survival brain, especially with the breakout of the pandemic. Oh my gosh. Not wanting to go out and getting deliveries and making sure that the person has gloves on or a mask on. So we have been operating in this space of survival for months now, and it is emotionally draining. So listen to this. When the emotional centers of our brains cause us to go into survival mode, there are things that are suppressed. And so when our emotional centers of our brain are activated, it causes our thinking to be suppressed. We need, as leaders and influencers, to continue to be able to consequentially think in this season. And so this whole idea of it's okay to be, it's okay to not be okay. Let me repeat that. It's okay to not be okay. That is absolutely true. However, it is okay to not be okay, but it's not okay to stay there. Because we as leaders and influencers, our mindset makes money for us. Our thoughts generate our how we sustain our lives. And even over and above that, our purpose, like we have a purpose that we carry, right? It's not to say that we can't be depressed or we can't be anxious, but we have a responsibility to eventually rise up and take authority over those extreme emotions, so our frontal lobe, the front part of our brain that causes us to logically think and use our wisdom, they both can't lead the parade, guys. Those extreme emotions and your logic cannot both be leading the parade. It's one or the other. And so how do we get ourselves, how do we get those emotional centers to not lead the parade and get our thinking operating? How do we do that? Because that is a human need. As influencers, we got to be able to help the people that we influence come out of survival mode and into thinking mode so that we can act in a progressive way. Because all of these emotions don't change policy. All of the extreme emotions does not change the legislation that has got us here in the first place. The emotional centers of our brain, those extreme emotions, do not get us a seat at the table. It doesn't get us on the menu. I'm sorry, it doesn't get us on the agenda. My bestie, who's a councilwoman in New York, says it all the time. She says, if we are not on the agenda, we will be on the menu. If we are not on the agenda, we will be on the menu. They will eat us alive if we don't get on the agenda. So how do we break out of that emotional space and allow our thinking to kick in? We have to stop asking ourselves, why me? Why my business? Why my family? Right? Because as soon as you ask why, you are pushing your brain into survival mode. Remember, as soon as your brain perceives that it is a victim, it will go into survival mode. When we are in fight or flight mode our entire life, listen, this is why so many of us are stuck. You're stuck in your survival brain. You've been abused, you've been in domestic violence relationships, and so it keeps you stuck. Why? Why does it keep you stuck? Because as soon as you perceive a threat, your mind goes into what? Survival mode, where you're not thinking. We need to think our way to our breakthrough. We got to be able to absorb new information to get to the other side of our breakthrough. So even your own self-talk can cause your brain to feel like a victim. You're a victim of yourself. You are a victim of your own perpetration. Your own self-talk becomes an abuser. So this is why it is important to free ourselves of negative self-talk, or free ourselves from those environments that cause our brain to respond in survival mode because it believes that we are being victimized. So let's move forward. We're going to talk about regulating your moods. It's important, number one, to understand what you're experiencing. It's really important to understand that. We talked about some root causes right now. Survival mode, like I don't feel safe. My son is an African-American male. My husband's an African-American male. I'm afraid for him. I'm afraid for my family. I don't know where we're going to pay rent or how we're going to pay our mortgage or whatever it is. Just understanding that there are circumstances that are happening in our lives. We are responding to it. We are not brushing things under the rug. We are clear about what it is we are, or the root causes for why we feel the way that we feel. Sometimes we don't know, right? Sometimes we're not really sure where or why we feel the way that we feel. And this is why it's important to align yourself or be open to a therapeutic process that can help you to discover and expose why you feel the way that you feel, why you react the way that you react. In this time, most of us are very clear about where and how, how our emotions are reacting to what's happening in our day to day. So understanding it, being able to identify it, because anger is like the color black. Black is a combination of many different colors that creates the color black. Anger is very much like that. Our anger, we have to be able to peel off the layers of anger, right? So this is fear, and this is, I feel betrayed by the people that I thought would support me in this, or I feel vulnerable. So we have to take that anger and peel off the layers to truly identify the emotional range that we are experiencing. And the last is understanding how to decompress. So understanding the emotion, understanding the root of it, being able to identify and take your emotional experience and learn how to transition that into words, and then learning how to decompress. This is how we regulate our emotions. This is how we bring it to a healthy balance. I want us to now talk about how we cope, okay? Because this is very important. And we're going to go back to decompression in a second. So we talked about understanding the human needs right now, all of our experiences from pandemic to now. We talked about our survival brain and how our brains respond to circumstances that cause us to feel unsafe, right? That fight or flight, those extreme emotions that we have to take dominion over in order for us to download that wisdom, to access those logical centers of our brain, to make good decisions and effective decisions in this time, right? We talked about that. We talked about mood regulation and understanding that there has to be an awareness of why you're feeling the way that you're feeling. Again, that's a big challenge for many, right? Maybe not so much in this day and age, because we're having this collective experience as a world, right? But understanding it, identifying those emotions, and being clear on how to decompress. Now, there are many different coping styles, right? But I'm talking specifically about what we are experiencing in this day and age, and the main ones that we are seeing right now. And I want you to share what your style is. Like literally after we talk about these 3 different styles, I'm going to stop the screen share and I'd like us to talk about it, and then we'll jump right back in. Okay, 12:47. We are drawing, wow, time is just flying. Okay, here we go. The first style of coping, we're talking about how we are responding to the day-to-day operations, to the day-to-day stressors, to the news, to everything that's going on right now. And the first one is avoidance. There are 3 A's. The first one is avoidance. And I want to talk about 3 ways that people avoid. Number 1, people go into denial. They just deny that this is even happening. To accept the truth that is so clear to us would be more distressing, right? It would be more distressing than to just call it a lie. That means that if I accept this truth, if I accept that this is true, that we live in an unjust society, that I have these biases, and there really is this privilege that I benefited from for all this time. If I accept that as truth, then I have to now be exposed to myself. It's exposing generations before that channel this spirit of hatred and prejudice. And so if I deny it to be the truth, this doesn't exist. Racial inequality does not exist. Police brutality, it doesn't exist. You just have a bunch of non-compliant Black men that don't know how to deal with. If I can deny the truth, then I am safe. Because if I accept it as truth, then there has to be a call to action. This is why a lot of us deny truth. Because once you know the truth, now there's a call to action. Now that you know he's cheating on you, now what are you gonna do? Now that you know that you deserve better, what are you gonna do now? So we have to understand that sometimes we'll deny the truth because the call to action that needs to happen after that sometimes is difficult for us. So denial is one. The next It's just, so denying is denying the truth even exists. Then there are those who avoid, who are very clear about the truth, but they just do not have, or they don't think that they have the capacity to navigate through that truth, right? So they're not listening to the news. They don't know what's going on. They're in their own world. They've unplugged themselves from the world. I call them road runners. They don't like confrontation. They don't want to discuss it. They just want to escape and avoid the realities of our day-to-day. And then there are people that avoid in a healthy way, that they may unplug just for mental health reasons, but eventually they'll re-engage again. So they'll re-engage, they'll turn on the television, they'll make sure that they stay informed and aware and just not consumed. So here we can see where avoidance can be a healthy thing. So that's the first A, avoidance. And under that, we have people who deny the truth, those who know the truth very well, but just escape and avoid the realities of our day-to-day. And we have those who do avoid in a very healthy way, and they make sure they re-engage later. The second way that people cope is through aggression, whether it's verbal aggression or physical aggression. And that physical aggression can be property destruction, what we've seen in looting and all of, now mind you, there's some opportunists that are just, taking advantage of the fact that they can get a free printer at Target, right? But, there are people that are really emoting for real. And the only way that they can channel that overwhelming anger, that extreme emotion, is through aggression. We see that verbal aggression in social media, people that are using words to injure others, to call people out. They're cursing, they're yelling. There's so much emotionally charged language in people's posts. These are individuals that they never really learned any other style of coping but through aggression, right? So that's verbal aggression, and that can be physical aggression. And then the third one is to address something through action. These are individuals who, as soon as this started, they already started thinking, where do I fit in this space? How do I fit in this dynamic? How can I use my connections? How can I use my platform? How can I use my business? How can I use my divine gifts? These are action-oriented individuals who cope through action. So we have avoiders, we have aggressors, and we have action-oriented individuals. And the only one of these that truly affect change is through action. But some of us have acquired coping skills that are not necessarily healthy. So I'd like for you to share what your coping style is. You can unmute your line and share whether you are an avoider, whether you are an aggressor, or whether you are an action-oriented person. And let's just be honest here, because we all have learned behaviors and emotional injury that causes us to respond in ways that are not necessarily healthy. And that is not that it's okay, but it's okay to share it and expose it, and then learn the skill sets to overcome that. Marilyn?
I would say through this process, I've displayed all three. And the place that I'm at right now would be action. I went through the part of avoiding, not trying to allow it to overcome my thought process. But now I've moved into a place of action. And more specifically, I look at what's going on in my region. How can I plug in to be involved in the process of change? I'm joining virtual meetings with dignitaries in the area, figuring out how can educational leaders, public relations professionals help to move the narrative around positive reinforcement with things that are happening in the area. So I'm definitely in a space of action right now.
Awesome. Who else would like to share? While you guys prepare to share, I will say that I'm very action oriented. And so my initial response was that, but sometimes even in action, it can also be an avoidance. because while I just felt like I don't need to see the video. I don't want to see the video. Let's just make it happen. What are we going to do? How are we going to get our local government? How are we going to, let's just do this. Let's just do this. But I think that that says a lot about my inability, even till this day, to watch the video. I cannot bring myself to watch it. And I think that there's a level of avoidance in that. It could be healthy, and it can be something that is not so healthy as well, depending on all of the things that are causing me to not be able to watch. I think that there's a reality that's really hard for me as a therapist. As a therapist, guys, I treat pedophiles. I treat people who have committed very gruesome crimes when they have not been psychiatrically stable. And the reason why I am able to continue to function as a psychotherapist and continue to partner with people to overcome those demons is because my life philosophy is that there is good in everyone. That's what keeps me going. This idea that there is good in everyone. So it's going to be very hard for me to stomach someone watching a man die slowly for 8 minutes and 46 seconds and still believe that there is good in everyone. And I think that's where the avoidance comes in for me. Who else would like to share their coping style? Avoiders, aggressors, action-oriented folks. Feel free to also share in the chat as well. We're going to go back to the slides. We're coming very close to the end of our hour. So this is the three main ones that we see people kind of using and electing as a way to kind of process their emotions in this season. Secondary trauma, because we talked about understanding. Remember, we talked about the importance of understanding where our emotions come from, understanding what we're feeling, not just saying I feel angry, but truly understanding our emotional range. And then we talked about decompressing. So going back to understanding the root of why we feel that the way that we feel brings us to this concept of secondary trauma. Now, how many of you have heard of post-traumatic stress disorder? If you have heard it, you can give me a hands up. You can put your comment in the chat. Let's see. All right. So Asha says yes. Okay. So post-traumatic stress disorder is a condition. It's a response to a traumatic event or exposure to multiple events and experiences that cause emotional injury. And that emotional injury then causes us to experience levels of dysfunctionality in major areas of our lives: family, relationships, community, work, school life, those types of things. And one of the things that we learned as psychotherapists after studying post-trauma was that there's something called secondary trauma. And this means that while I did not experience the trauma firsthand, but because I witnessed it, or because I had multiple exposure to someone that did, that I took on the trauma, I took on the injury, I took on that symptomology, I took on those emotional reactions as if I was the one. That is secondary trauma. So a lot of us right now are experiencing secondary trauma. I have had people call and say, I don't know why I'm grieving over someone I don't even know. I don't understand why I feel like I've lost a member of my family. I don't understand why I am so angry. I don't understand why I cannot eat and haven't been able to eat since the video. People are saying that they cannot sleep. We collectively are experiencing something called secondary trauma. There are two factors, there are many, but two that we're going to talk about today that can increase the probability of you experiencing secondary traumatic stress. The first is the similarity in the characteristics of the victim. Okay, so again, the probability that you will experience traumatic stress, the more characteristics we have in common with the victim, the higher the probability that you will experience this symptomology, right? So for example, if there was a high achieving African-American woman who was raped by whatever, right? Because that's a characteristic that we also have, our chances of experiencing higher levels of stress are greater. The second is the probability that this can happen to us. So the greater the probability that this can happen to us, the greater the probability that we will literally experience this traumatic symptomology, right? For example, what's the probability that we would possibly end up going jogging in an area where we are the minority, right? The probability of that happening is quite high. So that means that we are now exposed to this secondary trauma, because the probability of us experiencing that is quite high. We are all very well aware right now that our chances of having interactions with police are quite high. And so again, we are hyper vigilant. Our emotions are on 10, and we are collectively experiencing secondary trauma. We're crying, we're withdrawing, we're not sleeping or sleeping too much. We're not eating or eating too much, engaging in emotional eating. We're angry, we're irritated, we're restless and don't really understand why. We have high anxiety and worry. We're negative, we're thinking negative, right? We talked about hypervigilance already. We are fatigued. We don't even know why. I just feel so tired. I just feel like I need a nap. How many of you guys have said in this season, I just feel like I need a nap, right? This is not stuff that we generally do as high achieving women. And so all of a sudden it's like, I just need a nap. And some of us are just feeling numb and detached. And it's like, we get it and we should feel bad. And we're watching the news and we're watching all the struggles, but we're just like, I don't know why, I just don't feel it. That's secondary trauma. It's feeling numb and feeling detached. And some of us are experiencing physical ailments and don't even realize it. Your period is off, it came too late, it was heavier than usual, you're having headaches, migraines, whatever it is. Sometimes our emotional experience will transition into a physical response. Secondary trauma. So how do we decompress? So we talked about the root. A lot of us are experiencing trauma right now. We talked about that emotional experience. How do we decompress? And many of us do it in different ways. I have taking a bath, exercise. We went through a deep breathing exercise for one of my classes. I don't know if it was a Monday afternoon class. You guys can remind me if you were part of that webinar, but we did a whole exercise. I walked the attendees through how to belly breathe. We have to stretch. Stretching is very decompressing. Some of us probably don't even remember the last time we stretched. Some of us don't even remember the last time we stretched. So stretching is decompressing. Journaling is decompressing. Coloring. I think every high achieving woman should have a batch of coloring books at home and in their office. Crocheting and knitting, that's decompressing. Talking to a positive friend. Counseling and therapy is decompressing. Meditating, getting massages, absorbing new information. That's learning a new language, learning to play a new instrument. We have to keep our brains thinking. We have to keep our brains operating. We're talking about decompressing extreme emotions. Soaking. Soaking is not only a spiritual process, but it's also a psychological process. And for those of you who are not aware of what soaking is, this is when you just allow yourself to just be lost in relaxation and comfort and just wait for communication from a higher power. And you're just literally just lost in the presence of your higher power. Most of the time, soaking is led by soaking music, and it's an amazing way to also decompress from extreme emotions. And then there's tapping, and we're going to do a quick tapping round, and we will move forward since we are out of time. Okay, so we're at 104. We'll do a round of tapping and then we will begin to close. So tapping is a way that we tell our brain that we are calming down, that we are decompressing. We're telling our brain that, yes, I am experiencing, I'm aware of the anxiety, aware, right? We're not sweeping under the rug anymore, CEO chicks. I'm aware of the anxiety. I'm aware of the grief. I'm aware of the disappointment. I'm aware of the doubt. I'm aware of the confusion. Like this wasn't supposed to be this way. 2020 wasn't supposed to be this way. I'm aware of that disappointment. I'm aware of the disillusionment. I'm aware of the fear. This is when you are telling your emotions that while I'm aware of this, brain, we are going to now calm this thing down. We're going to compress and we're going to get our thinking and our juices going and take control. So there are certain areas in our body that if we tap on it in rounds and speak that positivity, you're almost programming your mind to do what it needs to do to calm yourself and allow you to get centered enough to be the powerhouse leaders and influencers that you are. So remember this. Some of the points that we tap on are the outside of our hands, and you use your fingertips and you literally tap like this. Pardon my corona nails. I haven't built the courage to get my nails done yet. So you just tap right on the outside of your hand. And as you are tapping, you are saying very positive affirmations like, I'm aware that I'm overwhelmed right now. I'm aware that I am experiencing fear right now. And I know that things will be well, and I have the capacity to change this, right? So you whatever your affirmations are, you're saying it while you're tapping. So you tap on the outside of your hands with the fingertips, the inside of your eyebrows right here, tap. You could do one hand or both. So right where your eyebrows begin, the ends where your eyebrows end, under your eyes, under your nose. Taking really good deep breaths from your belly, under your lip. Making sure you're verbalizing those positive affirmations, prophetically declaring right under your neck bone. Your back, right under your bra strap. And again, you could tap on both sides. And then you end it with your monkey tap right on the top of your head. That's one round, and you start again. You can do 4 or 5 rounds of this. By the 4th or 5th one, while you may not be at a complete 0, you will take yourself from a 10 to a 4. So that's tapping on the outside of your hand, inside your eyebrow, the ends of your eyebrow, under your eyes, under your nose, under your lip, under your collarbone, bra strap, monkey tap on the top of your head. That is tapping. Bringing it all together, it's important to know who you are, be intentional about your unique needs, understand the needs of others, make yourself relevant for those perceived needs of others, and influence actions that attract total life prosperity. So that means that when you are in pour out mode, right? When you are in pour out mode, that you're doing so in a way that causes people to engage in decisions and behaviors and actions that attract total life prosperity. We're gonna stop right here. It's important for you to do this as influencers. Schedule your scaling, literally in your phone. You put in 3 or 4 times a day that your alarm will go off. And when your alarm goes off, you ask yourself right there in that moment, how am I feeling right now? How am I feeling right now? Because if we are going to continue to be influencers, we're going to have to be very clear about where we are in our emotions. So you schedule. Scaling means that you are taking inventory of yourself, right? So you ask yourself, how am I feeling right now? And if you are experiencing extreme emotion, then you would select at that moment a course of action. You're going to go, are you going to do a round of tapping? Are you going to get a couple of minutes of sunlight? Are you going to pull out that coloring book? Are you going to call that friend? But we have to make sure that we are not just experiencing it without taking some action to counteract it. And then the last is your gear assessment, right? I used to drive a stick. So you're assessing your gear. Am I in pour in gear or pour out gear? When you're in pour in gear, that means that I need to withdraw for a little bit and have someone in my on my builders list to deposit into me. We have to recognize when our gear is pour in gear. And then in that moment, when you ask yourself and you're taking that assessment, and if you conclude that you are in pour out gear, that you are at a place where you can pour out, then do so. But make sure you don't conclude that you are in pour out gear when you are absolutely empty. Because when you are influencing from a pain point, the chances of you channeling that pain to the people that you influence is very high. That's why we have to be careful that we are receiving from people who are operating and leading and shepherding from a place of power and not pain. Because you can channel that pain and that brokenness to those who you influence. So it's important to know that if you are in pour-in gear, that means that this is a pour-in season for me where I just need to align myself with a builder, that you're not pouring out when you should be sitting and allowing yourself to be poured into. We have to stop pouring out of an empty cup. It can only cause emotional injury, further emotional injury for the people that we love. It's about 1:12. We are over time. I know we started a little bit late waiting for people to log in. I wanted to take this time to allow you to ask questions right now of anything that we have gone over before we close. You can unmute your lines and ask questions. Any questions? Awesome. One of the things that we did not get to go over, and that is the prescription for ideal living and longevity. The prescription for ideal living and longevity. And I'd like for us to pick up there when we have a continuation of this class. And that are the prescription for ideal living and longevity are 7 things that we should be doing during challenging times to make sure that we are well. The first is to be intentional about your mental health, to be intentional about your emotional space, right? If you had a broken leg, a broken ankle, you would know that there are certain special things that you would have to do to take care of that broken ankle. We need to do that for our emotional space. Do you need to take more naps? Do you need more time in the sun? Do you need more exercise time? Whatever that is, be intentional. You have to be fortified, mind, body, and soul. You got to fortify your minds. We should be learning in this season. We should be learning everything that we need to know about inequality and justice. We have to be able to look at our businesses and see how our businesses can address those human needs that we talked about earlier, right? Fortifying your mind, fortifying your body, making sure you're eating well, sleeping well, that you're getting the water that you need, and fortifying our souls and being intentional about it. We have to be protective. We cannot be consumed by media right now. So allow yourself 12 or 15 minutes at the start of your day, a check-in for 5 minutes midday, a check-in 12 to 15 minutes at the end of your day, but don't allow yourself to be consumed. Protect your ear gates, protect your eye gates. The next is to be productive. Sometimes when we're experiencing extreme emotions, we just want to just not be productive. And guess what? Some of us may need that, and that's okay, so long as you don't stay there. It's important to be creative in this season, to be helpful to others, and most importantly, to be hopeful. While we call this unprecedented times, these times are precedented, and those outcomes are precedented too. So if you just allow yourself to be hopeful, to take your rightful place as part of the answer, know that with you, we are all part of the answer. We are the light, we are the salt, right? We are the light, we are the salt, and we are all a body. If you are a foot, be the foot. If you're the arm, be the arm. If you're a neck, be a neck. If you're a mouth, be a mouth. If you're a nose, be a nose. There is no competition in your lane. Stay in your lane, dominate in your lane, move forward. Understand that we as influencers, we have the capacity to influence outcomes in the earth. We have the capacity to influence outcomes in the earth. And we have to make sure that we're being very intentional about taking care of ourselves. You know what we do as high achievers? We normalize abnormalities. We normalize abnormalities. Not being able to sleep for 8 hours straight uninterrupted is an abnormality. Finding a comfort in a plate of ice cream, and that's the only way that you could come. These are abnormalities. An inability to presently parent your children, these are abnormalities. But what we have done, we have normalized abnormalities. So this is a season where we have to expose every abnormality, call it what it is, and get help to overcome it. Oh boy. I could go for another hour, another 3 hours, another 4 hours, but we will close here. I don't see any questions, not hearing any questions. Guys, there's a call to action. There's a call to action. We didn't get to the homework slide, but that slide indicated that it's important for you, based on what you heard today, to identify 3 growth potential areas. Just 3 things that you're like, you know what? Wow, that rang a bell, something that resonated with you. Create a corrective action plan for each growth potential area and align yourself with someone who is weak, who is strong in that growth potential area, right? It's important to align, because accountability is powerful. So you're going to identify those 3 growth potential areas. You are going to create a corrective action plan for those 3 things, and you're going to align yourself with a powerful accountability partner to get you through. We do not just want leaders. We want leaders and we want influencers, because that's how we give birth to legacy. So dominate, make sure that you continue to infiltrate, illuminate, and dominate on your mountain. There is no competition in your lane. Let's stay well while we win. Let's stay well while we win. Let's stay well while we win. Thank you.